It is World AIDS Day and the fight against AIDS continues as hopes remain high. A UN climate summit brings together the largest gathering of world leaders in Paris. And Amazon.com teases its long-awaited premiere delivery. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Roch-Marc Kabore emerged the winner of the presidential election in Burkina Faso and will become the country's first new leader in decades. The election of the former prime minister represents a pivotal moment for the West African nation, which has been ruled by leaders who come to power in coups for most of its history since independence from France in 1960. Kabore served as prime minister and head of the National Assembly under President Blaise Compaoré, who was toppled by an uprising in October 2014 after 27 years in power. Kabore split with Compaoré early last year and formed an opposition party. Provisional results from Sunday's election showed Kabore won 53.5% of the vote to defeat former finance minister Zéphirin Diabre, who scored 29.7%, and 12 other candidates. Well, now for more on the Burkina Faso election, Bagassi Kora of VOA's French to Africa service joins me live via phone from Ouagadougou. Bagassi, first, how is the mood in Ouagadougou? Bagassi, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Bagassi? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, looks like we have some issue there getting to Bagassi Kora. We will try to reconnect with him. And now joining us is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu, and on an important date in the fight against AIDS. Lino.
Hello, Vincent. Well, December 1st is World AIDS Day. The theme of this year is getting to zero. UNAIDS says new infections are down by 35% since 2000, and AIDS-related deaths are falling by 42% since the peak in 2004. However, a new report from UN agencies found that AIDS is now the leading cause of death for Africa's teenagers. The report says that half of the world's HIV-positive teens between the ages of 15 and 19 live in South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Mozambique, Tanzania, and India. And that only 1 in 3 of the 2.6 million children under the age of 15 living with HIV are on treatment. Experts say it's a huge setback in the fight against the virus. Joining us via phone from Harare, Zimbabwe, is Amorita Baines, UNICEF Regional Advisor for Eastern and Southern Africa. Ms. Baines is attending ICASA, the 18th International Conference on AIDS and Sexually Transmitted Infections in Africa. Ms. Baines, welcome to the program.
Hi, Lenore. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. So, listen, we're having some good news in the fight against HIV/AIDS, but when we hear what is happening with the teenagers, it's really disconcerting. What are the issues there?
You're absolutely right. For the first time, we are seeing some good news, particularly in getting treatment to HIV-positive pregnant women, what we call PMTCT, and more treatment to prevent new infections for newborns. But the bad news is absolutely in the second decade of life. And we're seeing now through some analysis and data that, as you said, AIDS is the leading cause of death among adolescents in Africa, and AIDS-related deaths have tripled. Well, what's happening is we haven't really understood what the situation is for adolescents and for teenagers. And now we're getting the data, we're having a better understanding, and it compels us to do more and to respond to their needs.
Can this be an indication that perhaps even though we're making very good gains on the scientific level, perhaps the social aspect of the epidemic have not been given enough attention?
The social and broader environmental aspects absolutely need to have more attention. When you look at new infections among 15 to 19-year-old adolescent girls, 7 in 10 are among girls. So, we've known for a long time about the disproportionate impact of HIV on women, on young women in particular, and girls. And now through this analysis and in UNICEF, we're really trying to understand and respond to what adolescent girls need. So first, for the ones who are HIV positive, connecting them to life-saving treatment where they can live healthy, productive lives. And for those who aren't infected, making sure they have the information and the means to protect themselves from infection.
So then when you look at the way forward, we have 15 years left to reach this milestone in terms of getting to zero. What is UNICEF's strategy?
Our strategy is first to draw attention to the situation. For so long, adolescents and the impact of AIDS on adolescents has been a blind spot. So we've seen at ICASA this week in Harare a lot more attention and talk and commitment to responding to the need of adolescents who are affected by HIV. But second, we have to do something about it. So in UNICEF, it's about supporting governments, scaling up high-impact interventions, access to condoms, knowledge, medical male circumcision. It's also addressing some of those issues that you just mentioned, gender inequality, keeping girls in school so that they get the information. You know, it's a broad, comprehensive program, and that's what we need to see, supporting our government in the national program, supporting civil society, and actually working and listening to adolescents themselves in terms of what they need, because they have the right to access life-saving treatment as much as anyone else.
Ms. Baines, thank you so much for joining us. Anurita Baines is UNICEF Regional Advisor for Eastern and Southern Africa. Now, with some major milestone achieved in the fight against HIV/AIDS, many are optimistic that the fight against AIDS could be won. However, some major challenges remained, and only 15 years are left to achieve the mighty goal of eradicating AIDS by 2030. VOA's Carol Pearson takes a look at what it might take to actually have an AIDS-free generation.
The global community has come a long way in the battle against HIV/AIDS. With proper treatment, people with HIV can live long, healthy lives. And if they take anti-AIDS drugs, the amount of the virus in their blood can be so small that it's impossible to infect other people. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control says a daily pill can prevent HIV infection for those who don't have the virus. Dr. Anthony Fauci has spent much of his life working on HIV/AIDS at the National Institutes of Health. He says globally, we have turned a corner on the virus.
If you look at the trajectory of the epidemic, we are on a course towards ending it in the sense of as we know it, because we've always known it as going up, now it's flattening off, and now it's going to start to go down. And we're starting to see that decline.
There are still 37 million people living with HIV, 2 million new infections a year, and more than 1 million deaths each year. But even in sub-Saharan Africa, there's progress. UNAIDS reports that new HIV infections declined by 41% since the year 2000. Young people in the region are at a particularly high risk for HIV/AIDS.
Older men are infecting young women between the ages of 15 and 24, and then those young women 5 to 6 years later go on to infect their young male partners in their 20s. So if you want to change the total course of the HIV epidemic, you have to get older men on treatment, and then you have to implement programs that allow young women and facilitate young women staying HIV negative.
Those most at risk are intravenous drug users and homosexual men. Rodney McCoy is an AIDS activist who is HIV positive. He spoke about what he sees as the biggest impediment to getting to an AIDS-free generation.
Not talking about HIV, not talking about what we do sexually, not wanting to get tested. Basically, that refusal to acknowledge that HIV is still an issue, and that refusal to look at our own risks.
Acknowledging that HIV is real, eliminating the stigma around HIV disease, and getting more people on anti-AIDS drugs is what it's going to take to get to zero. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
That's our Africa Health Report for today. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thank you very much, Lino, for joining us today. And be sure to watch for Lino Mudu every Tuesday and Thursday for the latest health news in Africa right here on Africa 54. And I will go back to Burkina Faso in Ouagadougou to rejoin Bagassi Kora. Welcome to Africa 54, Bagassi. Bagassi, do you hear me? Bagassi Kora in Ouagadougou, do you hear me? Okay. Again, looks like we have serious trouble with the phone line there. Let's just switch gears here. The White House has announced commitment from 73 U.S. companies that are joining a pledge to support action on climate change. The goals include reducing emissions by as much as 50%, reducing water usage by 80%, and buying 100% renewable energy. Also, Tuesday at the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris, French President François Hollande said France will give African countries $2.1 billion over the next 4 years to develop renewable energy sources. Several heads of governments attending the summit Monday endorsed action to protect and restore forests. Brazil and Norway declared that they will extend their partnerships to preserve Brazil's rainforests. And Britain, Germany, and Norway announced an aim to provide $1 billion per year for the next 5 years as incentive for countries to pursue emission reduction goals set out by the United Nations. Well, the UN Climate Summit is being called the largest gathering of world leaders in history. 6 years ago, climate talks in Copenhagen failed to reach a climate agreement, but there is optimism that this time the talks could yield a wide-ranging deal. VOA Europe correspondent Luis Ramirez reports from Paris.
The way leaders here see it, this gathering is their best chance to save the planet. Their call for action on the summit's opening day is urgent.
This is a pivotal moment for the future of your countries, your people, and our common home, our planet. You can no longer delay.
The goal? To cut emissions enough to reduce the warming of the world's temperature by 2 degrees Celsius. Not doing so, scientists warn, could mean droughts and devastating extreme weather events, melting polar ice, and rising sea levels. What's different at this summit is that each country has laid out at the start what it plans to do to meet the carbon emission goals. The world's largest polluter, China, committed to do its part by capping carbon emissions by 2030, but says nations should be allowed to set their own agendas.
The Paris Agreement should accommodate the national conditions of variation between countries and lay emphasis on practical results.
Delegates also began revealing details of how they will fund their pledge to boost climate-related spending by $100 billion in the next 5 years. Converting to greener sources of energy is an expensive prospect for everyone, but it's an even bigger burden for economies in transition. Russia has historically been a reluctant partner, but on Monday, it too made a commitment.
Russia will continue contributing to joint efforts on global warming prevention. By 2030, we hope to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 70% compared to the basis year of 1990.
Leaders gathered on day one, hoping an early show of unity at the start of this 2-week meeting will give the talks a strong push that will result in a historic agreement. Leaders gathered on day one, hoping an early show of unity at the start of this 2-week meeting will give the talks a strong push that will result in a historic agreement, which they hope will rescue the Earth. Luis Ramirez, VOA News, Paris.
Well, addressing the opening of U.S. President Barack Obama urged world leaders to rise to this moment in the fight against climate change as he addressed the opening of the United Nations Climate Summit in Paris. VOA White House correspondent Aro Pandey has more from the French capital, which is still reeling from the November 13 terrorist attack.
Less than an hour after landing in Paris, President Obama paid tribute to those killed when Islamic State gunmen opened fire on concertgoers at the Bataclan Theater nearly 3 weeks ago. Later on Monday, the U.S. leader saluted the people of Paris for insisting the UN climate conference take place in the aftermath of the attack.
An act of defiance that proves nothing will deter us from building the future we want for our children.
Talk of a low-carbon future dominated the summit, with Obama calling on world leaders to secure a long-term climate agreement with regularly updated targets not a stopgap solution.
One of the enemies that we'll be fighting at this conference is cynicism. The notion we can't do anything about climate change.
On the sidelines of the summit, Obama secured the support of leaders of the world's largest carbon emitters. China's President Xi Jinping.
We have both determined that it is our responsibility to take action.
And Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
We agree that Paris must recognize and protect the ability of countries like India to pursue the priorities of development, growth, and poverty eradication.
President Obama also held closed-door talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, where he reiterated the need for Russia to refocus its efforts in Syria against Islamic State and not the moderate opposition. White House Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes.
In the last several weeks, we've seen efforts by Russia to target ISIL, whereas there were very little at all before that. However, we also continue to see Russian operations that target other elements of the opposition.
Obama also called for de-escalation between Russia and Turkey after Ankara's recent downing of a Russian jet, a point White House officials say the president will reaffirm during talks with his Turkish counterpart on Tuesday. Arup Pandey, VOA News, Paris.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. Check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Now, coming up, a web-based platform that connects employers and professionals who are committed to social and economic development in Africa. Stay with us.
Green Beat for a healthier planet.
Bigger isn't always better, at least for some homeowners who are tired of the expense and energy use of their houses. So a trend for what some call tiny homes is gaining popularity. Shane Lentz got a chance to try before he buys.
I wanted to go to the extreme limit of being off-grid and thinking if I did this and this was the most extreme version of it, could I manage?
Shane and his wife tried out tiny home living with the Getaway Project sponsored by Harvard University. It allows people to get a taste of what it's really like to downsize, and I mean downsize, to a 15 square meter home. But Jay Austin is actually living his dream in a tiny home in Washington.
Be prepared for, I think, more work and more energy than you might otherwise expect. Also, expect that the reward will be worth it.
A typical U.S. home uses about 10,000 kilowatt hours of electricity a year. But a tiny house using solar panels and propane requires just a fraction of that power. I'm Rebecca Ward for VOA's Green Beat.
Welcome back. Now, thousands of young, educated Africans are on the job hunt. And the first step to getting a job is to make contact with a potential employer. African Dev Jobs is a web-based platform that connects employers and professionals who are committed to social and economic development in Africa. Alvin Sangano recently sat down with Nina Oduru, president and founder of African Dev Jobs, and first asked her about what inspired her to start the platform.
I was truly inspired to create African Dev Jobs after working in Ghana with youth leaders and developing young leaders in Ghana. And one of the key issues there was access to employment opportunities. So young people and anyone in general finding the jobs that they wanted even after they've gotten great degrees from great universities. In addition, I was looking as a diasporan, someone that is African yet living outside of the continent, wanting to connect diasporans also to opportunities, job opportunities on the continent. So those two things really inspired me to create that platform, which has in turn, become something that is connecting people all over to the opportunities on the continent for development. Our offices are here in Washington, D.C., yet we have a team member in Amsterdam, and we have people also in Ghana working simultaneously to create this platform and to keep it updated for people that want these opportunities.
How do you plan to achieve your goals and objectives?
So one of the key things is, of course, the access to opportunities, which on our site, we share the opportunities there, but also we have collaborative events to bring employers and people together, professionals together that are seeking these opportunities, as well as connecting people to career development opportunities. Lastly, diversifying the field. The development sector is vast and robust with opportunities, yet we find that Africans are not as represented in the field, even on the continent. When you look at international NGOs, certainly, and yet local NGOs are definitely doing their part in increasing more engagement from Africans in the diaspora. So we want to elevate that. We don't want to leave it just to the locals. We want to make sure that there's diversity all across the field in development, whether it's international NGOs, multinational organizations, or local organizations.
Lastly, congratulations on your award at the Wharton African Business Forum. Would you tell us more about it and the pitch competition?
Thank you so much. We were so delighted to win that award. The Wharton African Business Forum convened some of the, really amazing leaders and innovators that are creating businesses for Africans and the diaspora. And we got a chance to pitch our business plan and our model to some prominent leaders that were our judges, who also are very much invested on the continent and have organizations of their own on the continent. And the experience was, of course, challenging. We didn't even know who we were competing against. And so that was amazing. And we walked out winning, yet what was really more important is that we reached people in the audience.
Thank you very much for stopping by. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, a superfood that is keeping small growers busy in Brazil. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Burkina Faso, former Prime Minister Roch Kabore is elected president after almost 3 decades of one-man rule. Chinese president arrives on a state visit in Zimbabwe. The focus will be to develop agreements on economics and infrastructure. In South Africa, Prince Harry visits a youth center in Cape Town during his 4-day tour of the country. Finally, refugees from Yemen seek shelter in Djibouti as conflict increases in their home country. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Esther Gido-Ewart, and here's what's trending. What's that in the sky? It could be the shoes you ordered. Amazon has unveiled what its unmanned drones for package delivery would look like. The drone is equipped with sense and avoid technology to sense, then avoid obstacles in its path. The video shows the drone approaching its targeted landing spot, dropping the package, and then taking off again, presumably to return where it came from. The launch of the promotional video appeared to be timed ahead of Cyber Monday, one of the biggest shopping events for electronics retailers. Amazon did not say when it hoped to have the drones in service. Next up, the superfood trend is keeping small growers busy. Acai berries are growing in popularity across the world due to their perceived health benefits. The fruit of the acai palm tree is high in antioxidants, and the boom is keeping berry pickers and producers in Brazil's north hopping. You have to be fast to make good money in this business and able to tolerate brutal humidity and high temperatures. Back in the 1990s, The acai was only consumed in the north area of Brazil. But since the superfruit has become known worldwide, the demand from other countries and even from other states in Brazil has increased dramatically, according to national statistics. And that's what's trending today. Vincent.
Thank you. Well, Ethiopia hosted the first African Circus Arts Festival with performers from 7 different African countries. Most are youngsters who come from challenging backgrounds. And they say the circus has given them a second chance. Martha Van Der Wolf reports from Addis Ababa.
Juggling, balancing, gymnastics and other tricks were performed during Africa's first circus festival in Ethiopia. Circus is an upcoming art form on the continent. It is changing the lives of some young people.
It gives them also the opportunity to be socialized. It gives them the opportunity to perform on stage and to be proud of themselves. It gives them self-esteem, self-confidence.
South African circus performer Shamir Johnson has been doing circus for most of his life. His passion is the trapeze. Growing up in a difficult neighborhood, he says his life might have looked very different if he hadn't joined the circus.
Some of my family, they also into gangs and drugs. So probably for me it would be easier to go in that same direction that they went. But I joined the circus, so for me, my mind's not there.
Circus groups from 7 different African countries showcase their skills. All say they are social circus groups, meaning they focus on attracting youngsters who face different kinds of challenges. Circus Debre Bahan, an Ethiopian group, tours the world with a group that includes disabled people.
We give them artistical training, and the third thing is, with these artistical performances, they start to earn money. And with that, they start to change their family life and their life.
The circus performers feel that African circus art is different from Western groups. They say African circus shows more physical strength and focuses on positive storylines that resonate with communities. Martha Van Der Wolf for VOA News, Addis Ababa.
Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us here in Washington. Have a good night.
I'm Michelle Joseph for Anglais Télé. This is VOA. Follow us at La Voix de l'Amérique. Go to lavoixdelamérique.com.
The Voice of America today is a window in which we have to see delivering the messages for contacting the people wherever they are. And Albanian people, as people of a small country, need to have such and deserve to have such information from the United States and from all around the world. So it's a bridge. Voice of America, it's a bridge between entire world and Albanian citizens.